This morning we're going to be looking at the attributes, the perfections, the essence of God. This series of messages is not about heaven. It's not about hell. It's not about the Bible. It's not about salvation. It's not about the church. It's not about you or me. It's about God alone and Himself alone. The very subject of the attributes of God is humbling. In some ways, it's hugely enlarging for the believer. If you listen to this, really grasp what we're talking about when we're talking about God, these messages should change you forever of the way you read the Bible, of the way you think about God, of the way you are looking for Him to lead you. As you look at the attributes of God, of course, there are many theologians that have worked over this. And, some theologians say there are 14 attributes of God. Some say there are two major categories. Some say there are 21 attributes of God. I believe that there are 40 attributes of God. And I'm going to teach it as such. I'm not going to put them in categories. I'm just going to teach them one after another. These 40 attributes of God. Now, there are 4 chapters in the Bible that really help us to open up the essence and the perfections, or if you will, the attributes of God. They are Psalm 139, and if you're going to be studying this, and hopefully you will study this through the weeks ahead, you want to be looking at these chapters in the Bible. Psalm 139, Genesis 18, Isaiah 40, and Hosea 11. Those 4, we're also going to be looking at Psalm 90. But those 4, Psalm 139, Genesis 18, Isaiah 40, and Hosea 11, really open up for us the whole idea, the whole concept, the whole wonder of God Himself. So let's start with reading Psalm 139. Why don't we stand together, and as we read it, I'd like to go through the whole first 18 verses. I know it's a little long, but it helps to set the stage of what we're going into. It helps to open up for us, our minds and hearts, the hugeness and the wonder and the glory of God. O Lord, Thou dost search me and known me. Thou dost know when I sit down and when I rise up. Thou dost understand my thought from afar. Thou dost scrutinize my path and my lying down, and art intimately acquainted with all my ways. Verse 4, even before there is a word on my tongue, behold, O Lord, Thou dost know it all. Thou hast enclosed me behind and before, and laid Thy hand upon me. Such knowledge is too wonderful for me. Let's say that together. Such knowledge is too wonderful for me. It's too high. I cannot attain to it. Verse 7, where can I go from Thy Spirit? Or where can I flee from Thy presence? If I ascend to heaven, Thou art there. If I make my bed in Sheol, the netherworld, behold, Thou art there. If I take the wings of the dawn and dwell in the remotest part of the sea, even there Thy hand will lead me, and Thy right hand will lay hold of me. Verse 11. If I say, surely the darkness will overwhelm me, and the light around me will become night, even the darkness is not dark to Thee. Of course, I'm reading from the New American Standard. And the night is as bright as the day. Darkness and light are alike to Thee. For Thou dost form me in my inward parts, and Thou dost weave me in my mother's womb. I will give thanks to Thee, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Wonderful are Thy works. My soul knows it very well. My frame was not hidden from thee when I was made in secret and skillfully wrought in the depths of the earth. Thine eyes have seen my unformed substance, and in thy book they were all written. The days that were ordained for me, when as yet there was not one of them. Verse 17, how precious also are thy thoughts to me, O God. How vast is the sum of them. And finally, verse 18, if I should count them, they would outnumber the sand. When I awake, I am still with thee. Praise God for his mighty and wonderful word. You may be seated underneath it. The concepts of God, I believe, though they are huge and in many ways insurmountable in their intellect and in their wonder and in their glory, I believe that we as his subjects, we as his people, are meant certainly to understand some of what God is all about. Now, I've been 40 years in the ministry, known the Lord for a long time, majored in Bible in college, pastoral ministry, and a second college, studied under some of the greatest minds in the world, both theologically and naturally, worked on a couple of doctorates, and I'm telling you, I know very, very little about God. So as I do this, this is not meant to be all-inclusive. This is not meant to be deep in the sense of finally exhaustive. Not at all. Now, the early church fathers would quickly reference the names of God alongside the attributes of God. Now, through the years, we lost this concept. But I want to bring it back this morning. And I haven't really found any exhaustive commentary that really does this justice, and I hope to do some of that this morning. Augustine talked about God. And I don't agree with everything Augustine said theologically, but Augustine in the 5th century, he said this, around 412 AD. He said, God is the highest, best, most beautiful, most perfect. Nothing better can ever exist or can be thought of. He is God above whom there is nothing, outside of whom there is nothing, apart from whom there is nothing. Supreme life, supreme truth, supreme blessedness, supreme wisdom, supreme essence. Let's look at the first of these 40 attributes. And the first one, I think I put it here, and I think God means for it to be here because it's something we can understand, and that is his immanence. It's said there in Psalm 139, we just finished reading, and it's worth reading again. The first couple of verses says, O Lord, thou hast searched me and known me. Thou dost know when I sit down and when I rise up. Thou dost understand my thought from afar. Thou dost scrutinize my path and my lying down, art intimately acquainted with all of my ways. Immanence from Psalm 139. Now, the name of God I'd like to attribute to this is Yahweh Shammah. And it means in the Hebrew, the God, the Lord, the one who is there. We'll just call it the Lord who is there. Let me give you a definition. I'll do this for each of the 40 attributes, if we get that far. But let me give you a definition of this attribute, immanence. And none of these definitions were taken out of any commentary. Here's the definition. That attribute of God that denotes his closeness and intimacy in being with his subjects. I'll say it again. We'll put it up on the screen in case you missed it. It's that attribute of God that denotes his closeness and intimacy in being with his subjects. God is close to you. He's closer than that baby you hold. He's closer than that shirt you wear. He's closer than the skin on your face. The immanence of the personhood of God. He's there. When you walk through a forest, you ever walk through a forest or ever gone out into the wild? When you walk through the forest, God's already there. It's not like He shows up because you're there. He doesn't need you to be there. He's already there wherever you would go. You cannot escape or separate yourself from His creation. You hear your heart? Right? You hear your heart? He's closer. You think a thought? Now grasp this one. He already knew that thought before you thought it. That's close. That's immanence. Try this one. You look, right? I'm looking at you. I'm looking at you, right? God has already seen what I'm looking at. He's already seen exactly what I see before I see it. I mean, as we go through these concepts, I pray it enlarges your concept of God. He's wonderful. He's our author. He's our maker. As a matter of fact, you are His idea. You go, I don't know if that was such a good idea. Well, we are His idea, and we're meant to bring Him glory, and we're meant to understand Him as much as we possibly can in this life. As a matter of fact, we're meant to spend, I believe, our whole life getting to know Him. You say, well, I'm already born again. I'm all set. Don't go there. Try not to go there. God means for you to learn more and more about Him every day, every hour, every, should I say it, minute. Sure He does. Transcendence. Second one is transcendence. I'm working my way through Psalm 139 a little bit at a time. It says there in verse 4, for even before there is a word on my tongue, behold, O Lord, thou dost know it all. Thou hast enclosed me behind and before, that's past and future, and laid thy hand upon me. Such knowledge is too wonderful for me. It's too high. I cannot attain to it. Where can I go from thy spirit? Or where can I flee from thy presence? You ever wanted to get away from God? Like, enough is enough. I don't need any more dealings from God. But, He will be there to help you even when you don't want Him. He's transcendent of your desires. Aren't you glad? You actually need Him not to be locked down to what you want Him to be or think or do. Transcendence. It comes here, we'll tie in this wonderful Hebrew word, Yahweh. And Yahweh basically means to be, or I am. I am that I am, to be. Jeremiah 33:2 talks about it. Transcendence, I'll give you a definition. It's that attribute of God that denotes Him as being above all His creation and superseding it in power and glory and divinity. He's above all things. As a matter of fact, He's beyond all things. You ever see a nice sunset? My brother Jim, I've got 3 brothers, but he's always sending me these sunsets from Atlanta. I don't know if there's anything else going on in Atlanta than these sunsets, but it seems like every night he's found some new sunset when it's a cloudy day. But he's always sending me these glorious sunsets. So if you've ever seen a glorious sunset, He is more glorious. The sunset just speaks of the glory of God. It's not His glory. You go, wow, look at the glory of God. Don't say that. That's not the glory of God. The sunset or the sunrise just speaks of His glory. He supersedes creation. As a matter of fact, He looks into creation, His creation, and sees it from the outside. That's a concept. He sees creation he's transcendent of it all. He understands our thoughts from way into eternity, right? He's outside of us, but he's also knowing us. At the same time, he's like a lamp inside of us, searching our thoughts and intents. God is separate and independent from nature, and I'm happy to say from humanity. Now, we're within gravity, right? If you don't believe it, try floating right now. No, we can't. We're within gravity, and we need things. We need air. Matter of fact, you need air a lot. I mean, you can not last more than 4 or 5 minutes, or certainly not more than 10 minutes without air. You can't go more than about 3 days without water or something to drink. You can't go more than about 40 days without dying, or at least starting to die, it's starting to decay. But God is transcendent of all these things. You say, well, I got my really cool cell phone. I've got my really neat laptop. I mean, it's really super. It's the latest deal. God is beyond. He transcends computers and all their knowledge. He's beyond technology, and I might add, he's beyond us. Of anything we can come up with in the next 1,000 years or so. He's beyond. He transcends all need. Number 3, invisibleness. You say, don't these dovetail? Well, they do and they don't, because you can say different things about each one. Invisibleness. It says there in Psalm 139, verse 7, it says, where can I go from thy spirit? Where can I flee from thy presence? In Exodus 33, verse 20, God said to Moses, you cannot see my face, for no man can see me and live. Let me give you a definition of invisibleness as it relates to God. It's that attribute of God whereby he hides himself from finite man, that's you, that's me, who would surely die at the unveiling of his full glory. God can't be seen and won't be seen unless he wills it. Now, men have seen a reflection of God. You might have a theophany. That's a fancy word for how God reveals in a cloud or in fire. Or a Christophany, another big word, how he might reveal himself in a fiery furnace. Anthropomorphism, that's seeing God's hand scratching the words into the wall, right? Or the burning bush, or even an angel. If we, any of us in this room, or all of us in this room, were to see God in his fullness, toast time, you're toasty, you would not survive seeing God in his fullness. Now, Jesus Christ said, he who has seen me has seen the Father. And they hardly understood what he was talking about, but they got a glimpse of it at the Mount of Transfiguration when the veil was lifted just for a moment, and they could see him, the Lord Jesus, shining in his glory. Now, he's ascended on high, so he's not visible to you or me. Doesn't mean God can't reveal himself in many ways to us. But you're not people that say, oh, I saw God behind that bush, or I saw God jumping over there. I mean, I'm thinking that's really kind of irreverent, is a nice way to put it. Because God is not visible according to his word to us in his glory. Let's look at the 4th one, which is infiniteness. David, and by the way, David wrote Psalm 139. He said, if I ascend to heaven, thou art there. If I make my bed in Sheol, or the netherworld, behold, thou art there. The Hebrew word we like to use here is El Elohim, and it means Most High God. Now, God spoke to Solomon when he tried to build a house for him. And Solomon understood. But God said, who is able to build a house for him? For the heavens and the highest heavens cannot contain him, Solomon was saying. So who am I that I should build a house for him, except to burn incense before him? Incense, of course, was used during worship. So, yeah, we can put together a building, sure. We make it as nice as we can, sure, and we should. But it's not meant to contain God in his infiniteness. God is not subject to any limitation at all. It even says, people say, well, God's in heaven. You know, even that statement limits God. Yikes. That's up there. Because Scripture says in 1 Kings 8, it says, heaven and the highest heaven cannot contain thee. What a thought. That God is enthroned above heaven. Wow. Think big, think far. How big can you think? How far can you imagine? You doing it? Okay. He's further, he's bigger, he's infinitely more glorious and out there than our little minds can ever imagine. You say, well, I sent him way out there. I was thinking he was way out there. Not enough. Not enough. Infiniteness. Fifth one. Well, I should probably give the definition of infiniteness. Is that attribute of God that denotes him as being without subject or subjection to limitations. Any limitation. Still with me? Immensity. This is even different than the one before. In Psalm 139, it says, if I take the wings of the dawn, if I dwell in the remotest part of the sea, even there thy hand will lead me, and thy right hand will lay hold of me. Surely the darkness will overwhelm me, and the light around me will be night. Even the darkness is not dark to thee, and the night is as bright as the day. Darkness and light are like to thee. Immensity. That attribute of God that denotes the hugeness of God and that he is not limited to space and location in his wholeness of character. The largeness and hugeness of God. Aren't you glad he's big? Aren't you glad he's bigger than you? Do you need him to be bigger than you? You really do need him to be bigger than you. Let's talk about light just for a moment. Now, light travels really fast. I mean, really, really fast. As a matter of fact, light travels at 67 million miles an hour. That's quick. That's how fast light travels. And to even denote a part of space, they've talked about how far light going at 67 million miles an hour can travel in a whole year. You know where I'm going on this, right? The farthest galaxy that we've been able to perceive doesn't mean it's the furthest one, but it means the farthest one we've been able to see with the Hubble telescope, and this is just recently, by the way, happened. They just found this one even further than they ever thought was out there. You ready for this? The furthest one is 13 billion light years away. I mean, that is difficult for my mind. Maybe you got that one, but that is out there. The hugeness of space and the hugeness of the galaxies. God outside of the universe, while he's eminently with you and me in his wholeness and completeness and totality. God created space, but he's not limited to space. Wow. God as an entirety is in this room, but he's not limited to this room. He's not divided, he's not shrunk, he's not enlarged. Matter of fact, he's unchangeable, but I won't get into unchangeable right yet. But God fills all things. Now let's get this correct. All things are not God. That's pantheism. That's heresy. All things are not God, so that Stan is not God, even though God is here. Many heresies have been developed saying that God is all things. That's not true. God is over all things and around all things and close to all things. But he's not all things. They are his creation. Number 6, freedom. Freedom. Psalm 139, it says, Thou dost form my inward parts in verse 13. We just finished reading it, but I'm reading it again. Thou dost weave me in my mother's womb. I will give thanks to thee, for I'm fearfully and wonderfully made. Wonderful are thy works. My soul knows it very well. My frame is not hidden from thee. When I was made in secret and skillfully wrought in the depths of the earth. That goes back to the dust that Adam was made from. Creationism. Okay. Thine eyes have seen my unformed substance, and in thy book they were all written. God has a book. You know this, right? He's checking it out. He's writing it down. They're all there. The days were ordained for me, when as yet there was not one of them. We're going to work on that concept in a few minutes, maybe in a few days. Let me give us this name of God. Again, the Hebrew name is El Shai, and it means the living God. The living God. Let me give you a definition of this attribute, freedom. It's that attribute of God that denotes his limitlessness is related to his need for anything else to complete, fulfill, or enhance his divine being. God is completely independent of his creatures. That's you. That's me. You say, I don't want to be called a creature. Well, you're a creation of God. You're one of his very own. But he has total and complete freedom. God doesn't need oxygen. He doesn't need a chair. He doesn't need the floor. We do. But let's take his freedom another step further. He's not limited to our expectations, our desires, our wishes. You say, well, I really want God to do this. I really want him to take care of this issue. He's not limited to our desires, our wishes, our requirements. My professor, Dr. Charles Ryrie, one of the greatest theologians of our day, he's with the Lord now, just passed last year, but Dr. Ryrie said, we cannot put him in our debt. That's an important concept. We cannot put him, meaning God, in our debt. The day and the night are the same for him. You say, well, I've got a dark hour of the soul. My mind is so under it. Can you relate to some of this? I can. Okay. Sure we can. Some of us have walked there. Amen. Thank you. But that darkness isn't his darkness. He sees right into it. It's like light. It's like your brightest day, your happiest moment. In God, there's no difference from your darkest hour and your brightest year or week or whatever. They're one to him, and he's still consistently free to be completely God to you in every moment of your life. He's absolutely limitless to kill, to make alive, to damn, to save, to do as he alone pleases. Freedom. He's completely free of us and our concepts of him. Say, how could God do this to me? I am really ticked at the Lord. Be careful with that. Be careful, because we'll talk later about God and His wrath, but you don't want to reach your hand into that sphere of questioning God and trying to be God in any situation. Independence, and I'll stop with this one. I think it's as far as we're going to get today. Independence. It says there again in Psalm 139, verse 17, 18, and 19, it says, "How precious are thy thoughts to me, O God, how vast is the sum of them. If I should count them, they would outnumber the sand. When I awake, I am still with thee." You ever woke up and go, wow, God's still here. Nothing's changed. You wake up thinking, this is a new day, and all of a sudden you realize, wait a minute, God hasn't changed. He's still here. "And thou wouldst slay the wicked, O God, depart from me, men of bloodshed." Independence is that attribute of God that denotes His not being under subjection to anyone or anything. He's not subject to me. Think of the things we're subject to. I mean, there's a lot of them. Gravity, we already mentioned that. Sunlight, you need some of it. Your heart beating, you're subject to your heart beating, right? As soon as it stops, you're in trouble. You know you're subject to your heart beating. Okay. You're subject to air. You're subject to friendships. We're meant to have friends, and godly friends at that. We are. We're subject to it, actually. We're subject in many ways to needing our spouse, or we're subject to hunger. Tummy growling, right? We as people are subject to love. We need love. We need life. Now God, on the other hand, is independent of all of these things. He's self-contained. God doesn't, try to walk with me on this, okay? God doesn't get lonely. God doesn't need you. God doesn't need worship. We do. We need to adore Him. We need to worship Him. We need to love Him. We need all these things. God doesn't need it. You say, well, I'm coming to church to make God happy. That's not why we come to church. We're not coming to church to make God happy. God's already doing just fine before we got here. Right? Matter of fact, He was doing just fine 1,000 years before we got here. And we'll do Him just fine 1,000 years after today. God's not lonely. It's we that need Him. We need Him so desperately. You know, there's so much more to say about God, and I could do this all day and all night. But I'm going to stop at 7, lest you get tired. I don't want you to get too much theology. I want you to get enough so you got something, and so somehow you got a little bit to grab onto.